Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and welcome back to all of you who are joining another live Action for Happiness event. My name's Mark Williamson, and it's lovely to be with you today, wherever you are all around the world. I can already see people greeting each other from all kinds of different countries and places, and you're joining and thinking, hang on, that just looks like Mark by himself. Where's the guest speaker I was expecting? Unfortunately, Ismail Kala, who's due to be with us today, there's been a technical issue at the site where he is at the moment, and there's no access to the internet, so he can't join us, and he sends his sincere apologies, and we may be able to reschedule the event. As some of you will know, I've hosted, I think, over 60 of these live events now. We've had about 350,000 people join one of these events live. And many people have said to me they'd quite like to see me sort of share a bit more about my own perspective and insights as part of an event, turning the tables a bit on me rather than me just hosting and asking other people questions. So this seems like a good opportunity to do that, and I'm happy to give that a go. And if you'd like to stick around, I would love to interact with you, share some of the things that I've learned in my journey in leading this Action for Happiness community for over 12 years now, and also to sort of do a few interactive things together where we can share some ideas. You can give me some of your feedback. We can have some interactive questions and really get all of you involved in whatever way you'd like to. So I hope that sounds like if not the same thing you came here for, at least a reasonable plan B. But I won't, of course, be offended if you decide that you'd like to spend the rest of your day doing something else. But what I'd like to do is, first of all, remind us what Action for Happiness is all about. And then do something. We'll begin and end this time together with a sort of set of practices that we do whenever we get together as the Action for Happiness team, and indeed when people meet in our local groups and courses all around the world. And it's a really powerful thing. We do a check-in at the beginning and a check-out at the end. So we're going to do that together today. But before we do that, just a quick reminder. So what is Action for Happiness? This is this amazing community of now over 500,000 people from pretty much every country in the world. I think 190 plus different countries. And we just ask people to make a pledge to help create a happier and kinder world, and that we each sort of commit in the way that we live our lives to try and create more happiness and less unhappiness in the world. It's a very simple idea, but it has quite deep implications for, well, the whole of our lives. Certainly in my own life, thinking about that idea has changed the work I do. It's changed how I am with my loved ones, with my friends in the community, with how I spend my time, who I vote for, what, the things that I care about in life. So that's the central idea. And as I say, it's amazing that 500,000 people now have joined this community in various different ways. And thank you to everyone here who's been part of that. Whether you're joining here for the first time, welcome. Sorry for the slightly different agenda to what you might have been expecting, but particularly to those of you who've been to lots of these events. I know some people have been to sort of 50 plus of these live events now, and we're so grateful for your support. Some of you might be using our app where hundreds of thousands of people share ideas every day. Some of you might use our calendars, which share monthly themes and daily actions, and millions of people have shared around the world. Some of you might host local groups or have run or been on one of our courses. So thank you in whatever way you've been involved in this Action for Happiness community. So let's begin, if you're still here and you're up for this, with what we call a check-in. So there are a couple of parts to this, and the first part is just pausing to have a mindful moment. So whatever you're doing right now, wherever you are in the world, maybe just take a moment to pause in what you're doing. And if you'd like to close your eyes, that's great. If not, just do something that helps you be in the moment and sort of feel relaxed. There's no right or wrong way to sit or to be, but just to be here in this moment. And just take a slightly deeper than normal breath. Breathe in, maybe through the nose if you can. Breathe out through the mouth. And just take a moment to notice how it feels to really focus on breathing. We do this life-giving thing all day, every day, but rarely do we stop and just pay attention to that amazing experience of breathing in and out. And as you're breathing, just hold your attention on the breath and then expand that attention to the body and notice how you're feeling right now physically. Notice how you're sitting or standing and what connection you may be making, for example, with the chair or with the floor. And just tune into the physical sensations in your body and notice how you feel right now. And now tune into what we might call the weather pattern inside of you. As well as the physical sensations, we all have a kind of emotional weather pattern. So just notice how you're feeling right now. Here you are, you've turned up to this event. It may be slightly different to what we were expecting because our guest has not been able to make it. I'm certainly feeling a mixture of emotions. Just notice how you're feeling right now. Again, there's no right or wrong way to feel, but just paying attention to the feelings inside. And let's just take one more deep breath and we'll come back to the next part of the check-in. Thank you for joining me for that. And it's lovely to see that the same number of people are still here as when I closed my eyes. That's always an encouraging sign. So the second part of the check-in is to bring our attention to, and to share if you'd like to, just a few words about how we're feeling right now. So obviously with Action for Happiness, we're trying to bring our attention to positive emotions and to create a sort of sense of hope and optimism. But for many of us, that may not always be possible. And in fact, our emotions can often be very difficult. And unless we make space to accept the full range of emotions, we can never really move on. So what I'd like to do, what I'll do myself verbally, but what we can each do in the chat is just share a few words about how you're feeling right now, whatever that is. No judgment, no right or wrong. And I'll let you know how I'm feeling, and then I'll have a look in the chat and see some of the things that you're sharing. So I'm feeling excited about this opportunity to do a slightly different event to what we've been planning, a little bit nervous and apprehensive about this format and change of plan. I'm really grateful to all of you who've turned up to be part of this. Let me just look at how you're feeling. So people are saying tired, relaxed, grateful, anxious, confused, calm, proud, worried, tense, inspired, relaxed, chilled, happy, blessed, hopeful, sad, curious, restless, agitated, drained, discouraged, calm, hungry. So thank you for your honesty and thank you for sharing that. And what I'm feeling as I see that list is, wow, what an amazing range of emotional experiences. You know, this is the reality of being a human being. We have this sort of roller coaster of different feelings. Many of those feelings described there are very difficult to deal with. Some of them, you know, might be long lasting, some might pass in an instant or two. And of course, many of them are also really pleasant feelings. And again, without any judgment, that's the reality of what each of us is going through right now. And it's important to make space for that and to acknowledge it. And then the third part of the check-in is to consciously bring our attention to something that we feel grateful for. So, you know, it is what it is, whatever we're feeling is there. And we can still choose to put our attention on something that we feel thankful for, something that we can see, even if life is terrible right now, we had a really difficult day, you know, there are still little things that we can feel grateful for. I mean, whether we are still able to breathe, you know, as we were in that exercise, whether we, you know, here I am in a room with the lights on and I had some tea earlier. So whatever else is going on, there's some little things I can be grateful for. So I'd invite you to think about something, bring to mind something you're grateful for and share that in the chat if you'd like to. I'm feeling grateful actually for the technology that allows, you know, hundreds of us to connect and be together here. And for all the people in this community who've been at this event and many others before, and all of the kindness and generosity that you bring to this community. That's how I'm feeling in terms of gratitude. I'm just gonna have a quick look at the chat. So someone's grateful for their veggie chili, their good health, their beautiful cat, nature today, sunshine, plumbing, cooking a nice dinner, good health, friends, pets, yeah, love for dogs, family, a lot of stuff about relationships, smiling, a fridge that's full, music, dinner, kids, flowers, being alive. Wow. So thank you for sharing that. And I wonder if some of you who've shared those really heartfelt things to be grateful for are also people who were sharing about difficult feelings. These two things can coexist. We can be feeling anxious and tired and restless and agitated and all those things, and still remember that we have friendships and family and health and other things that we value. These things can coexist, and actually how we choose to pay attention to those things really shapes not only how we feel, but also how we behave. And that's one of the things I'd like to talk a bit more about in our time together today, which is the balance between the things that really are outside of our control, but also the things where we do have some element of choice over how we respond, what we do, how we treat others, and the sort of energy that we bring into the world. So throughout this time together, I'm going to suggest that feel free to use the Q&A function and ask me questions. And I'll try and pick up at least some of those. We also have this ability to vote on questions that are popular. So if you see another question from someone else that you'd like to see answered, please do vote that up, and we'll try and get around to as many of those as possible. But I, as I said earlier, have had the pleasure of leading Action for Happiness for over a decade now, and have had this amazing opportunity to work with so many incredible scientists, psychologists, behavioral experts, teachers, spiritual leaders, and many people just from different parts of day-to-day life that have had these amazing experiences to do with resilience, mental health, relationships, well-being, how to thrive generally. So I'm certainly no expert. I can't come here with all the answers, but I can, I think, share some of the insights I've picked up from them and from my own journey along the way. And I'd love to share some of those with you in this time together. So I'm going to try and take these insights one by one. I'm just going to pick a particular topic that's meant a lot to me, share that with you, maybe get a few reflections, and then maybe take a few questions on it. So let me come first of all to, I think, perhaps the most important idea within the whole Action for Happiness community, and that is the power of action. So this is called Action for Happiness for a reason. And of course, there are lots of things that we can't change. We can't change the situation we're in. We can't often change the feelings that emerge for us when we experience a difficult situation or any kind of situation. And maybe it feels that right now is a tougher time than recent times for many of us because of the levels of uncertainty, our worries about both big issues, whether it's the climate or the risk of war, or the day-to-day issues around our families, our relationships, our work, our financial situation, our health. But actually, that's always been the case throughout human history. There have always been both big struggles and daily struggles in every human's daily lives. You may not think that when you see people on social media having their perfect lives, but I promise you, every single human being that's ever lived has worried about existential things and have struggled in day-to-day things. So if that's how you feel right now, and I know that I do at times, we're all in this situation. This is the reality of being alive and coping with the challenges of everyday life. But the really important point is that many of us think that if we can change how we think and how we feel, then we might behave differently. That was the conventional idea. For example, if you tell smokers smoking is bad for them, then maybe they'll kind of, they'll logically sort of change their behavior. But, anyone, and I include myself in this from many years ago, anyone who's ever tried to quit something like smoking, it's really hard to change your habits. But if you say to someone who's a smoker, take an action step, like designate a room in your house that's a non-smoking room, make a commitment to some kind of behavioral change that does less of this thing, then actually you feel and think differently. So the point I'm making here is that it's easier to act your way to a new way of thinking and feeling than it is to kind of think your way to a new way of acting. So this is why we focus on action so much. If I can just say hello to a neighbor and smile to someone on the street, if I can take a different route on the way to work, if I can get into nature, if I can pause and take a few deep breaths in a difficult situation, even if I'm not in a good mental space, I'm not feeling good, just that action can help change the mindset. So this is why action for happiness is so important. We can't change the world around us. We can't change our inner weather, but we can choose to get outside, to sing, to put some music on, to smile at a stranger, to pick up the phone to an old friend. And actually, these little actions have much more of an impact on our own well-being and the ripple effect that we bring into the world than I think we ever imagine. So I'd like to actually turn back to you all and just say, what is one action for happiness that you find really helps change how you feel? What's something that you may have done once or twice, or maybe build into your daily routine that does really shift your way of thinking and feeling? For me, cycling is a big daily action that has a huge impact on my mood. What are some of yours? I'm just going to look in the chat and see what you're sharing. So mindfulness, hydration, sea swimming, walking, qigong, spiritual books, African drumming, yoga, gardening, talking to friends, meditating, friendship, rock and roll, jogging, praying, taking walks, dancing. I love this list. Sleeping, mindfulness, helping others, going to my garden, spinning class at the gym, comedy, Pilates, coloring, taking a bath, bird watching. How wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm really uplifted by that list. So I'm just going to take a moment to pause and hold that sense of gratitude to you all for sharing that. And I think there's a lot we can learn from each other with that list, because some of those things are things I love to do and haven't done for a while. And I know that, for example, when I spend a bit of time with my dog or I sing, that it does change my mood. And actually, you're reminding me the benefits. Someone showed me some qigong moves recently, which I'd not done before, and I found it really amazing to connect mind and body. So I'm grateful to those of you who've been reminding me of that in what you shared just then. So maybe I'll just pause and see if there's any related questions that are coming up. Sophie's asking, what do you do on your not so good days along with gratitude? A good question. I have a number of things that I build into what I call my to-be list, as well as my to-do list. I realize I'm someone that uses lists to think about what I do in my day. So I've put in, alongside all the work tasks, things that I want to make sure I make space for. Meditation in the morning. I do a headspace in the morning. Gratitude that Sophie mentioned at the end of the day. But I also have some other little reminders, like get in touch with an old friend. So often if I'm feeling low, reconnecting is a really powerful way of helping with that. So one way I found recently, which is really lovely, is finding old photos of happy memories with people maybe I've not seen for a while but mean a lot to me, and then digging out that photo and just sharing it with them on a messaging platform and just saying, hey, remember this? And actually, just that moment can really rekindle a sense of connection with someone else. But I had a difficult moment, was it yesterday morning or the day before? I was a bit grumpy. I'd had a difficult conversation with my daughter. I was taking the dog for a walk and he was being really awkward and something was on my mind and agitating me. And then I bumped into somebody I knew, and instead of kind of just walking on and just saying a brief hello, I stopped and we had a chat. And I noticed that even in just 30 seconds of having a chat to another human being out and about, smiling and, fairly mundane, how are you? What's going on conversation. And at the end of it, I realized my mood had changed completely. Just that little action of a conversation, a smile, a reconnection shifted my mood more than I was expecting it to. So I think, again, we often underestimate the power of little human interactions, these micro moments that can really change our mood. Thank you for that question, Sophie. I'll come back to questions a bit later on. So the next big point I wanted to share with you is something that is a challenge that gets thrown at those of us that care about happiness and well-being, I think quite rightly, quite often, which is, are you saying it's not okay to be unhappy? You're promoting happiness. Are you saying that sadness is bad? And I hinted at this earlier when we did the check-in, but the key point here is living a happy life overall is not about trying to be happy all the time. A life of only good feelings is neither possible nor desirable. It would be kind of weirdly one-dimensional and inauthentic. And in fact, if we try and deny our negative emotions or push them away, that's not helpful. It's completely natural to feel anger when we feel like we've been hurt in some way, to feel sadness if we've lost something that we treasure, to feel frustration, to feel all of these emotions have signals. So actually, the fundamental component of lasting happiness is an acceptance of things as they are, and then a choice we make over how to respond to what happens to us. So I'm reminded, I'm sure many of you will know the amazing serenity prayer that says something like, give me the, I need to get this right now, the grace to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I've probably completely mangled the wording there, but you get the idea, which is we can choose how we respond, even if we can't change the situation. So that isn't about saying, I'm going to push away all the anger and the frustration. It's about saying, well, this is here, and this situation is annoying, or I'm really sad because I have lost a loved one or had a really scary health diagnosis. It is what it is. Now, how can I respond in the best way possible for myself, for others, and for the world, actually? So I'm just going to look in the chat and see what's coming up. Yeah, someone else is helping me word. In fact, Sarah, my colleague, is kindly writing the correct wording of the Serenity Prayer. Yeah, and Tanya's making a point about it's okay to cry. Actually, it's living a happy life is not about never crying. In fact, some of the most meaningful and purposeful moments of my life have involved tears, whether that's a piece of music that sends shivers down the spine and leaves you moved to tears, or whether that's, let's say a funeral of a loved one who meant a lot to you, and it's brought up all this emotion, and yet something in that is, it's in that sense of loss that you realize how much the love really matters. So in many cases, tears are an expression of a deeper sense of meaning and purpose that are, of course, part of a genuinely happy life in the long run. So I'm going to pause there after that thought, and I might come to another question in a second. But on that theme of something deeper, a deeper sense of happiness, that's not just a sort of a smiley happy, but a kind of sense of contentment and acceptance. What are some of the things that help you feel as though life is more fulfilling in the round, even when you're dealing with difficult times? Maybe if people would like to share in the chat some of the things that help you cope in those moments where life isn't sort of happy in the conventional sense, but you still can hold on to a sense of purpose and fulfillment and contentment. So I'm going to read a few out here. My Christian faith, music, the idea that this too shall pass, reading, the sense of accomplishment from things that have been achieved, focusing just on today, time by myself, perspective, acceptance, green spaces, cycling, thank you, well done, I'm a big fan of that. Distraction, my cat, helping others, lovely, kindness again, taking one step at a time, having a clean space can be a sense of support. The piano, again, more mentions to faith, watching the sky, remembering how far I've come, talking it out. Yeah, that's a lovely point. I will say a little bit more later on about relationships and feeling connected to others, because I think that's such a source of support. Thank you all. That's really powerful. Mantra, swimming, focusing on small achievements, making a commitment to caring and kindness, organizing things. Lovely, really good. Okay, let me come back to questions. Louise has asked, what's the most useful thing you've learned from hosting these talks? And she said brilliantly, by the way. Thank you, Louise. That's very kind of you. Well, I think I've learned the power of asking questions and listening, actually. I didn't realize I had a role or a calling as a host of events. And what we used to do with our live events, which many of you will know happened in London in a venue initially, was just say, welcome to our speaker, and then let the speaker talk. And then I started going on stage to have asked the Q&A and asked some questions with the speaker, and people in the audience said, oh, I love that bit when you have the conversation with them. So then when COVID happened and we switched online, I started hosting the events with more of a conversational style, and everyone said, oh, I like that. That's great. You seem to ask really interesting things. So I guess one thing I've learned is thinking about a good question is often as important as thinking about the right answer, because first of all, it helps you tune in to learn from others. Somebody once said, and I don't know who to attribute this to, but the only time I learn anything is when I'm not speaking. When I'm speaking, I'm just saying things I already know. When I'm listening, I'm learning new things. So I'm probably not learning anything while speaking tonight, but I am appreciating what I'm learning from you all in the chat. And I guess another thing, Louise, is how, despite having an incredibly diverse range of speakers, and we're really, really grateful for the amazing range of different sort of, perspectives, but also ages and ethnicities and backgrounds and skill sets that the speakers have brought. There is that amazing diversity, but actually some of the common themes remain actually remarkably consistent. So, first of all, happiness is not about the material things in our life. Once our basic needs are met, that's really important at a time of a cost of living crisis. But beyond being able to cover the basics, there are so many more important things than money and material stuff that contributes to our well-being. Secondly, the power of relationships. Our connection to others is probably the single most important contributor to lifelong happiness. Also, the way we talk to ourselves. And I've been amazed, both talking to people in this community, but also to experts, how many of us are really, really quite cruel to ourselves in the inner voice that we have. And we do it to ourselves, but we don't realize that so many others are also speaking to themselves that way and in their heads. And so we kind of feel that we're the only one with this sort of unhelpful inner voice, but in fact, it's remarkably common. So I think even just that sense of common humanity, that actually many of us have got a rather unkind voice in our heads, and we don't need to have that. And actually we can be a bit kinder to ourselves, not in a narcissistic pampering way, but just talking to ourselves the way that we would talk to a loved one or friend. That comes up really, really regularly, Louise. So that's just a few of the things that I think I've heard people say. Maybe another one would be the power of having a sense of contribution. And later on, I'm going to talk a bit about how lasting happiness comes not just from our caring for ourselves, but also caring for others. But let's come back to that a bit later on. Thank you for these great questions. So, how are we doing so far? I've still got the same audience size that we had at the start. That's a great sign. So thank you for being here. If you have joined since I last said it, unfortunately, our guest speaker can't be here today. So I'm sort of ad-libbing this and showing some of the insights and ideas that I've had in being involved in Action for Happiness. I hope you're finding this helpful. So the next up is an idea that I shared most recently with a wonderful group of graduates. I had the great honor of being asked to give an honorary doctorate or receive an honorary doctorate and give a speech to a group of graduates, amazing cohort of health and social care graduates in London. Again, very diverse skill sets, amazing energy in this group, but really daunting. I was in the festival hall talking to hundreds of people who just got their degrees and feeling like, what on earth can I say? I can't possibly do a Steve Jobs type inspiring lecture. But the idea I left them with was what I call realistic optimism. And it's back to this, a bit like what we were talking about earlier on with the Serenity Prayer. But I think optimism and hope are absolutely essential, especially at a time when we've got negativity in the media. The media makes money by selling us bad news. And of course, there are also lots of really difficult things going on in the world that we need to be aware of. But we can only solve the problems of this world, whether that's inequality or climate change or stability and providing good quality of life for future generations and supporting people in need. We can only do that if we have a sense of possibility and hope and optimism. So our ability to take action is, we need to believe that we can make a difference, and we can genuinely make a difference. But optimism and hope that are unrealistic and based on wishful thinking rather than a realism, they're not grounded, they're not really that helpful. They can be a bit passive, passively hoping that things will work out without doing anything about it. But they can also lead us to make sort of unwise choices and sort of pretend things are, put a gloss on things that are actually really need to be dealt with. And that could be in our personal lives, or that can be in the wider world. So I love this idea of being a realistic optimist. So that's sort of saying, see life as it is, including all the challenges. I did spend a while disconnecting from the news, and that was helpful, and it did help me reset. But I found a way of connecting with all the politics and all the chaos and all the negativity, but in a way that doesn't bring down my mood. It allows me to stay in touch and to see the reality of all the challenges we face, and say, okay, well, what can we do about this? And what's the sense of optimism that's helpful? Okay, we're facing, a lot of polarization in our society. What can we do to contribute to that positively? Well, first of all, I can listen to different people's different perspectives. I can try and respond kindly whenever I'm interacting with anyone else. I can, help bridge divides, whether that's in a workplace or in a community or in wider ways that we interact on social media. So although I'm really worried about the polarization of society, instead of going into the camps of angry ranters and rock throwers and say us versus them, I can sort of try to be a source of that feeling of common humanity, bringing people together, of trying to listen and trying to see people's perspectives and understand their hurt and respond to it with compassion. So that's an example, I think, of both realistic optimism, but also an idea that one of our speakers, Chris Johnson, brought up called active hope. And so instead of hope being a passive thing, it's saying, well, I'm not going to hope, naively for an outcome. I'm going to say, well, what can I do towards that outcome? And that's active hope. It's sort of saying again that, well, okay, well, if I hope that we can find solutions to the climate crisis, I'm going to get actively involved in the way I behave in my own house, the way I vote, the way I contribute or campaign, or the choices I make. And that's a form of turning that hope into something really practical, for example. And Emily saying in the chat, active hope is also really helpful with health problems. Yeah, that's very much the case. Thank you, Emily. Someone else saying they're doing an active hope course at the moment. Thank you, that's worth checking out. So I would like to maybe pause here a moment. Let's just take a breath and just notice how you're feeling right now. You've been listening to me waffling on for a bit, but I've really appreciated all the interaction. What is something that gives you a sense of hope right now? Not in a naive, wishful thinking, passive way, but in a way that you think is both realistic, but also something that you might be able to contribute to, even if it's just in some tiny way. So maybe if you'd just like to share a few words on a source of active hope or realistic optimism for you. What's something that is lifting you up right now? So I'm just going to read a few of these out as well. I feel capable. We are capable of change. My students are awesome. Helping others, knowing that I'm not alone, feeling the awe of being alive. My faith, being kind, volunteering, young people standing up, the next generation, baby girl during December, congratulations. Plans to socialize with family, grandchildren, making a difference, faith in humanity. These sessions, thank you, Louise, they show how we can change and have a ripple effect. Cooking dinner for friends. There are so many good people in the world, giving hope to others, family holidays, random acts of kindness. My daughter, wow, I'm really touched by these. And again, it gives me a sense of hope. I hope you're feeling this too, the idea that despite all the challenges we face, there are so many things to feel hopeful about. And I'm always reminded that when we see the news and we see the one really bad story and the few examples of hateful behavior, that we fail to see the millions, maybe billions of tiny acts of kindness and love and connection that happen literally everywhere, literally every day, in families and communities, in friendships, in schools, in workplaces. They don't make the news, but they are the absolute sort of life force that is part of being alive. And actually you all, by being part of this community, contribute to that, perhaps even more than the average person, but actually everybody has that sense of a web of connection and kindness that I think is so often overlooked in the sort of public discourse. Let me come back to questions and take another question, then we'll move on to another insight, but I'm realizing I'm already using up lots of this time. Masuma says, if you have to continue a relationship with your partner who always thinks negatively, non-forgiving and staying grumpy most of the time, how can I maintain my happiness at home? Yeah, this is a really difficult one. So we may have worked out how to look after our own well-being and stay in a good frame of mind. But if we're with someone, and it might be a partner, or it might be a colleague or a friend who is in a more difficult frame of mind, maybe negative or perhaps even toxic in terms of the effect they have on others, how do we respond? So I don't have all the answers to this, or indeed any solutions. I do know that we can't really change other people. So the first thing to note is all we can ever do is change how we respond to people. We can't force them to change. Now, we can affect how they behave through the way that we treat them. But I think the first thing we need to do is to notice that the only thing we really control here is our response. And so when a partner or someone we're in a relationship with behaves in a negative way and says difficult things and challenges us, the first thing we can do is take a breath, and we can notice, well, what's going on for them right now? I find that I often take things really personally and see a difficult comment as a criticism of me, and I immediately want to fight back and say, no, I didn't mean to get the shopping wrong, or I didn't mean to I defend myself. When in fact, the person who's saying that, they're not really attacking me. They're sort of expressing their own frustration and inner turmoil. And actually what they want to do is just be heard. And so instead of defending myself, saying, I hear that you're feeling really frustrated right now, it gives them space to say a bit more about their feelings, and it de-escalates a conflict situation into a listening situation. Now, that may not solve the problem, but I do think it does change the dynamic. And in terms of how to keep our own well-being, I mean, it is difficult. If we're with someone who is in a difficult state of mind, I think one thing we can do is to give ourselves a bit of self-care as well, to say, this is hard. Here's someone that I care about, or I'm spending a lot of time with. It's in a difficult frame of mind, and that's having an impact on me and others. That's really difficult. And to notice how that feels for you, and to give yourself a bit of compassion as well, and say, okay, and I can't necessarily change this, but I can be kind to myself. It's not my fault. I'm going to try and respond as well as I can, but I may not be able to. In fact, I probably can't change that other person's behavior, but I can still take care of myself, respond kindly, try and make the best of the situation in whatever way that is. Now, of course, we also need to have boundaries. So if you're in a difficult relationship where you are, in danger of having some kind of, threat to your own well-being, abuse, danger of some kind, it's really important to have safe boundaries, to talk to someone, to seek help, to not tolerate inappropriate behavior. But I'm not sure that's what the question was getting at in this case. So I think compassion and wise responding, but also in some cases really clear boundaries over what's acceptable and what's healthy. I hope that helps. So that actually brings me on to another idea on the subject of relationships. We've talked already about how important relationships are for our overall well-being. And this is a lesson took me years to learn. And I think this is, I don't want to be gender specific, but I think particularly men can be more prone to do this, which is to try and solve people's problems. And generally, when someone is sharing with you how they feel, and sharing, particularly if they're sharing their pain, they're not looking for you to fix their pain. They're looking for you to hear and acknowledge their pain, and to feel heard and to feel accepted, not to come up with solutions. And I find that particularly hard, because especially if it's someone you love who's dealing with a difficult situation and they're sharing what's going on, there's such an instinct to say, oh, have you tried this? Or what about that? Or oh, I think you could do this. And you want, the kind compassion within you wants to help that person. But actually, the most helpful thing you can do is just what people would call active listening, which is a case of hearing, really listening, first of all, and then just reflecting back what they've said. For example, I hear you saying that you're really angry and you're really upset about what's happened here. And you can add a sense of I'm really sorry that you're going through that. But actually, even just being able to say, I hear that you're saying this. And they might say, oh, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. They might clarify. And in fact, one of the great things about reflecting back to people is we might have misunderstood them. And they say, no, I didn't mean that. I meant, I'm just really, cross that it went this way. And you can say, oh, I hear that that's disappointing because it's not what you're expecting. And so it feels a bit awkward at first, but if we can train ourselves to just reflect back to people what they're saying to us, it builds the most amazingly strong connections. People feel really heard. They don't feel like you're trying to tell them how to live their lives, but they feel that you're accepting what's going on for them. You're really noticing what's going on. And I cannot tell you how important that is for healthy relationships. It's for conflict resolution, for whatever it might be. That you can use this at work, you can use this with your children, with your partner, and so on. So if you haven't already, check out active listening, or indeed going one step further with what's called non-violent communication, which goes beyond just listening to actually being able to communicate our needs. So behind every interaction and every human behavior in some ways is our needs, our need to feel heard, our need to feel appreciated, our need to sort of have a sense of purpose. And so if we can notice what our needs are in a situation and notice what the other person's needs might be, or at least ask more to help us work out what's really going on under the surface, then we're much more likely to respond wisely. So on the subject of relationships, that's one thing I think is really helpful, just really listening to people. But taking this more broadly for a second, I'd love to invite you to think about, what do you do that really nourishes your relationships? What are some of the things that you do to help you feel more connected to others? Maybe it's to help others themselves. It might be about you staying in touch or keeping connected. So I'm just going to open it out again to the chat. What are some of your ways of supporting and nurturing your relationships? So let me see what comes up in the chat. Active listening again, seeing people face to face, being there when needed, chatting on the phone, finding excuses to meet. I really like that. Hosting regular gatherings, making time. Yeah, I mean, putting it in the diary, that's great. Allowing vulnerability, being present, not judging people, remembering to say I love you, having coffee with my sister, checking in with people who are out of town, meeting regularly, compassion, asking specific questions of my children. I love that. One of the things I learned is, instead of saying how was your day, saying what was good today, which invites kids to share a thing that they're excited about rather than like it was okay. Being physically present, responding to bereavement calls. Wow, that's a lovely one. Being there for my children, empathy. Thank you, everyone. I sense a real wisdom in this community about how you approach your connections with others, and I hope you've discovered, as many of us have, the power of that sense of connection. And I'm really feeling that tonight, although I can't see you all because this is a webinar, not a meeting. I do feel really connected to you through these lovely comments and through your questions as well. Let me come back to another question. So I've answered both of those ones already. Let's have a look at this. Sarah has asked, it's difficult when you live on your own, have health problems and have a small social network. How can you feel content when life is like that? Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that. And again, I'm not able to have a full understanding of your situation, and I'm not an expert, so I don't necessarily have any great answers to that question. But I think this reminds me again, Sarah, of what we've talked about already, which is there are things that are outside of our control. Where we live, our health situation, the people we can and can't connect with. And I think step one is just accepting what is and being able to be at peace with that, to say, okay, this is how my life is, and I might wish it was different in some way. That wishing won't necessarily help. So why don't I just become at peace with how things are and with me as I am, how you are enough just as you are. And just step one, being at peace with the reality of the situation. And then I think it's back to the first point about action, which is, okay, well, what can I do from here that is helpful for me and for others? And this actually brings me on, so I'm really grateful for this question, because it brings me to another point I wanted to make, which is this idea that I've really dabbled with in my own life of, like, we can be our own happiness scientists. Now, we've had on these events all kinds of wonderful experts, many of whom are scientific experts in well-being and neuroscience and behavior. But I quite like what you might call the n=1 experiments. So when you do experiments, you sometimes have n=300, which means there were 300 people in the study. n=1 means it's just me. I'm just experimenting on myself. And I don't mean in a sort of weird clinical sense, but we all have the power in our daily lives to try things out with a sense of playfulness and experimentation, and to say, did that work or not? And I have, partly because of doing this job, and just also as a human being, tried out all kinds of things in my life over many years, and some of them have been not very good at all. They've been maybe in some cases a little bit disastrous or embarrassing or making me less happy. But in some cases they've been pretty good, and I might say, well, I might do that again every year or something. And in a few cases they've been life-changingly amazing, and I've wanted to do them perhaps daily as a result. And I probably wouldn't have known that unless I tried. So I love this mindset of experimentation and playfulness, which is try something out. It might be some of the ideas you've heard in the chat today, or something I've said, or something that's come to mind for you. give it a go. Maybe do something different, shift your routine, put something in your to-do list, try a new practice when you wake up, do something different when you're cleaning your teeth, get in touch with an old friend and notice, just like I did when I was, that example earlier, when I was out walking the dog and I chatted to someone, it's like, oh, when I stop and have a friendly chat, even if just for a few seconds, that does change my mood. Right, I'm going to do more of that. This is the idea. So, experiment, but also pay attention to the results like a good scientist. Okay, that didn't really have much effect. But that really did. When I went to the choir that I sang in my community choir, going, oh, goodness, why? I haven't got time for this. I've got so much to do. And then I sang with people in a room for half an hour and I came out going, wow, I feel really different now. Even when next week my brain tells me I haven't got time to go to choir, I'm going to go because that literally shifts how I feel and I feel so much more connected. So that's an example of, one of the happiness hacks that has, helped me. Some things I've tried have really not, I don't get on with cold water swimming, which many people love. I don't really like positive affirmations. I find them a bit weird. I don't really like, certain physical activities like HIIT workouts or certain types of nutritional advice like calorie counting. I don't think they're very helpful. But I have found that riding my bike every day, leaving longer gaps between meals, not avoiding sugar and snacks, stopping drinking alcohol, listening to podcasts, these are things that have had a really meaningful impact on my day-to-day well-being. So I hope it's a bit of a long answer to the question, and I hope it's also interesting and thought-provoking. So, and I'm sorry, I know there's loads going on in the chat here, which I haven't had a chance to pay attention to. So thank you for all your sharing, and I hope you're inspiring each other. My colleague Sarah is saying that the bookcase is the star of the show. A few people were saying earlier on about the coloured books behind me, which is not one of my happiness habits. I'm quite bad at organising books, but my daughter did this, and how we actually find books remains a puzzle because, of course, it involves a colourful search, shall we say. But what I'd like to invite all of you to do right now is to put your happiness scientist hat on and share either something you already do that you're experimenting with right now, or maybe even an idea that you would like to experiment with. It might be something that's come up in today's event, something else on your mind. What would you want either doing or would like to do more of in terms of happiness hacks and little daily habits that you're going to try out and see how it affects either your own happiness or the happiness of others? So I'm just going to pause and see what comes up in the chat. Please share your happiness experiments. So dancing, walking in the woods, playing table tennis, big fan of that. Cycling more, yes, big fan of that too. Handwritten letters, journaling, singing, going to the gym, looking at the horizon, joining a local Action for Happiness group. Well done, thank you, Emily. Craft, walking, learning a new skill, hiking, 2 hikings, leaving the house every day, writing songs, that's lovely, ceramics, swimming, really listening to music, dancing when doing the dishes, that's fantastic. I love that. Growing vegetables. Yeah, wow, these are brilliant and actually really experimental. I mean, some of these are quite common, but some of those are really creative and interesting and I wouldn't have necessarily thought of. Thank you, folks, and please do borrow each other's happiness hack ideas. So what we'll do tomorrow is send around a video to this event, or it may not be tomorrow, at some point soon, depending on how quickly we can edit this rather rambling event together. And we will also share the chat file so you can go back and see all of these ideas that others have shared, because they're still coming now. Play Scrabble, baking, spiritual retreats, using insight time and meditations, mindful crafting, such as Zentangle. So I don't even know what that is, but I'm looking forward to finding that out. So thank you all. Okay, we're coming towards the end of the scheduled time. I have one main final point I wanted to make, but I also have just wanted to remind you of a few resources that we have that you may or may not be aware of that I'll share in a moment as well. So thank you first of all for staying part of this event, which has been a slightly different format to what we expected. The last point I was going to share today is actually an idea that I'm now thinking of writing a book about, because it keeps coming up for me. And the working title in my head, at least, of the book is Happier for Good. And that's a sort of play on words, because of course, happier for good sort of means, we can be lastingly happier. We've talked a bit about that this evening. But happier for good for me also implies this idea of our happiness contributing to the greater good. And that's really the mission of Action for Happiness. This is not in that grand plethora of self-help only. There's so much, very good in some cases, but so much stuff that's about me, how to make me happier, self-care, wonderful, great books, great insights, but actually all a little bit too me focused and perhaps a little bit individualistic. Actually, I believe, and I know many of you do, that lasting happiness is about contributing as well as ourselves. And so I think the last point I wanted to make is that to really be authentically, lastingly happy, we need to combine caring for ourselves with caring for others too. And that these two things go hand in hand. So first of all, you can't pour from an empty cup. Unless you look after yourself, you're not really able to look after others. But also, doing good feels good. When we help others, when we contribute, when we're part of something bigger, that also gives us a boost as well. That's not the reason we do it. We are coming with an altruistic motivation, but it does really nourish our own well-being as well. So I'd love you to keep in mind that idea of being happier for good, for the greater good. And actually, this feels as important as ever right now. We talked earlier on about the sort of polarization, the division that we see in the world around us. There are so many people either just out for themselves or creating or contributing to a sense of conflict, a sense of otherness. And actually, by bringing that sense of wanting the best for others, wishing others well, that spirit of loving kindness to everything we do, we can have a meaningful impact on that. We can send out those ripples of care, concern, warmth, friendship in the way that we respond to people. That can be the way we talk to someone in the shop, the way we are on the street, the way we interact on the bus, the way we talk when we're in the park, the way we talk to our loved ones, the way we talk to strangers, everything we do. I mean, on a phone to a frustrating call center call where you're not getting the help you want, you can still be a warm, friendly, compassionate human being and recognize it's not that person's fault. So that's the idea I wanted to leave you with, really, that we can be happier for good, particularly when we contribute to a greater sense of good in the world. So I would love to end by asking you, what are some of the ways you would like to contribute to the greater good? What are some of the things that inspire you about the togetherness that we have in the human family and within this community? What are things you either already do or would like to do more of or see more of in the world that contribute to that sense of a happier and kinder world for everyone? So I'm just going to have a look in the chat. Volunteering, keep connecting, activism, being kind and smiling every day, encouraging people, being present, being a youth leader, lifting others up, supporting others, forgiveness, really powerful. I should have talked about that more. Thank you. Telling jokes, I love that. And then so many that I can't even read them. Talking to random strangers, just being kind, inspiring my staff, hugs, recognition for others, being a neighborhood watch coordinator, listening when that's what the other person needs. Smile, smile, smile. Thank you, Caroline. Do a kind deed, upcycling in my community. That's wonderful. Thank you all so much. I'd love to take more of your questions, and but particularly I'd love any feedback you have on how you found this session. I found it really lovely interacting with you all, and we're thinking about perhaps doing more of these and maybe making a format like this, something that we do more of, either as a webinar or maybe even as a meeting where more of us can be on screen and share together, and we can hear voices and see faces from more of you. So please do send in any feedback to this. But let me just finish by sharing a set of slides, well, some images that I just wanted to remind you of, that are resources you can use for yourself, but also that you can share with others if you'd like to spread the word. So first of all, if you haven't already seen them, and I hope you can now see this on screen, we have these action calendars that come out every month, a different theme every month, following this beautiful, slightly painful, alliterating sequence from Friendly February and Mindful March and Active April, Meaningful May. We've come out of Joyful June into Jump Back July for the resilience, and Altruistic August and Self-Care September are on the way. I think 35 million people have downloaded or used one of these calendars now. So please do use them and share them. They seem to end up on school notice boards, in workplaces, online and social media. They're a fabulous way of reaching out and just sharing these ideas. Little actions matter, and sharing that idea with people in your lives. Secondly, we have a free 10-day program, the 10 Days of Happiness. It's at 10daysofhappiness.org. It's an interactive program with a little digital coach called Abby, who's brilliant. You can learn the 10 keys to happier living. It's interactive. If you've tried it already, thank you for doing that. Please share it with others. If you haven't tried it, give it a go. We'd love your feedback. It's free. It's got loads and loads of work went into building it, and we're really proud of the content in that. And once you've done 10 days, if you like that, you can then join this app community where people are sharing actions every day of the year with a lot of kindness and support. And thank you to everyone here. There's 230,000, I think now, people who are active on our app. So thanks to everyone, including particularly our volunteer moderators that help make that a safe and friendly space. And finally, if you want to go a little bit deeper, we do have this amazing Happiness Habits course, which is a 6-week, quite intense chance to connect with others and learn and practice some of these ideas. If you go onto our website, you might find there's one happening near you. Or if you'd like to volunteer, as many people said they were interested in volunteering, you can step forward, get some training and volunteer to run the Happiness Habits course, or indeed one of our monthly groups in your local community. So we would love it if you wanted to be part of this ever-growing family of amazing volunteers doing so much. So we're at the end of our time together, and I'm going to end with a checkout, which is what we do at the end of Action of Happiness gatherings, whether that's a team meeting or a board meetings with our trustees or the local groups and course sessions. So first of all, let's just take another pause and just take a deep breath and notice how you're feeling right now. You've been listening to me speak incredibly fast, firing lots of information at you. And let's just take a pause. And the next part of the checkout is just to bring to mind something you appreciate about this time, this session together. So if you'd like to just share a few words of things you've appreciated, or something you're particularly going to take away as an idea that has resonated with you, it's really nice to sort of remind ourselves of one or two really key things that we've appreciated or want to hold with us. So I'm just going to see some lovely words here: connection, hope, appreciation, shared experiences, connection, realistic optimism, a new start. Happiness is a process, sharing, spontaneity, connection, advice, feeling holistic, active responding. Thank you. There's a lovely, appreciative things to take away. And then the final part of our checkout, perhaps the most important of all, is to turn our focus outwards. So here we are in a world with all the challenges that are facing, and I'd like you to bring your mind to somewhere or someone where they might be in need of a bit more happiness and a bit more hope and optimism right now. There might be a particular loved one or person you know that you'd like to send warm wishes to. It might be a particular cause you care about, a project, a campaign, an issue. It might be a location, a community, a part of the world, a particular group of people who are really struggling or in need of more love and support. And let's just take a moment together just to hold that person or those people or that place, that cause in mind, and just send out warm wishes and a sense of hope and kindness and generosity to those people. As we remember the pledge that we make as members of the Action of Happiness community to try and create more happiness and less unhappiness in the world. And let's put that pledge into practice together. Thank you so much for joining me and for staying here and being part of this event. Apologies again that it wasn't quite what we'd advertised, and thank you for bearing with me as we've gone off down a different track. But I've really feeling very grateful to you all for your time and your contributions and your comments and the wonderful questions. And above all, thank you for being part of this community. We really can create a happier and kinder world together, and you are very much part of that. And anything you can do to help involve others and spread the word and get more people thinking this way, living this way, and contributing to a world that can be happier for good, then that would be much appreciated. Thank you all so much, and see you again soon.